we're in $1.7 trillion in student loan debt. And really, we have 45 million Americans that have student loans. And I was really surprised that 26 million people had applied for the student loan forgiveness.
I know people were going to get that application in. We can agree to disagree whether or not student loan forgiveness should or should happen. But if it does happen, definitely turn your application in. So I already knew a lot of people were going to jump on it. I just think it's kind of a travesty because I know a lot of people were looking forward to starting the new year, having that clean slate of $10,000 or $20,000, especially if you're somebody who you only owe $10,000 or $15,000 left, or you paid off your $10,000 loan and now you get to get your money back while the government handed. Like I kind of see where those people would be a little bit hot right now.
I was kind of surprised that so many people had applied because it just seemed like it was kind of a mix of some people saying that it shouldn't be forgiven and there are other things that are more important than the student loans. But within the time frame right now, 16 million people they had approved to be forgiven so far, right before all the lawsuits and things had happened. So I was kind of surprised, and I was looking at my application because I'm like, okay, was I approved? But when I looked on there, I haven't seen anything.
So I processed mine.
Yeah, so I'm like, I need to know, did anybody get an email stating that they were approved to possibly get their student loans forgiven? Because I don't know anybody that was in that spot right now. Right. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to pull up this article. It's stating that Biden has officially asked the Supreme Court to rule on this student loan forgiveness. And right here in the middle, it's stating that 16 million they're asking to start off with the 16 million applicants who were already approved. Now, with this going to the Supreme Court, what do you think? With Biden asking them to go ahead and reinstate it for the 16 million, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, going to the Supreme Court is a two-part question. The first part is just him asking the Supreme Court to reinstate it so these things can start to get processed and paid off. If I had to bet money, and I've never been on the Supreme Court, but I work with federal judges and justices on the highest court in states, I would be shocked if the Supreme Court actually pushed this through to allow these loans to get processed. Part of the reason being is that anytime you have an issue that's going before a court that's going to hear it, if it's a constitutional issue, it makes the need for the court to hear it a little bit more important. And you would see, like, even let's say if you're a young attorney, you watch TV shows and it's during a trial and somebody will say, "Objection, Your Honor, relevance." Well, it's not relevant, so it shouldn't come in. They actually teach you as an attorney, always put a constitutional objection on your objection because it makes it easier for higher courts to review it because there's a constitutional argument. So because of that, I'd really be shocked. I mean, think about it. It's a constitutional argument with one side saying the Constitution, Congress has to do it. The other side saying the president has the authority to do it. That's the argument. You want us to process these payments before we make that decision on who can do what?
Exactly. That's what I'm talking about.
That'd be crazy.
But see, Biden was saying under the 2003 HEROES Act that they could forgive debt under, a national emergency. Now, I give Biden a hard time sometimes because I feel like, did he really want to forgive the student loans? And it's just like now, 14 months or so in, he wants to use this HEROES Act, but wouldn't it have been better if once he got in, we were under more of a national emergency then? So do you feel like Biden waited too long to use the HEROES Act to be able to forgive the student loans?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think he definitely waited too long. And I think the reason he waited so long is, I don't know if you remember early on, he was like, I'm having the Department of Justice and the Department of Education research to see if we can do this. And then we didn't hear about it for months. And I feel 100% confident that he was praying that they came back saying that he couldn't do it. Because if they would have said, "You can't do this, Mr. President," he would have came out immediately and said, "Oh, they told me I can't do it." Right. But because he didn't come out and say it, I was like, "Oh, they told him that he can do it." But with these things, it all depends on who's hearing the case. in how it's going to be interpreted. I've seen some laws get interpreted in really weird, unique ways. So it's just a matter of what the court thinks. And, the court is a little bit more conservative than liberal. So,
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because when I did that first video and I was stating when the first 6 states had filed their lawsuits, but they had got dismissed, and I was like, Biden probably was saying, go ahead and file the lawsuits, even though I know, 100% for sure he didn't do that. But, I was giving him a hard time because I was just like, he really didn't want this to go down, because I'm just like, once he had got elected, well, towards the end of his campaign, I feel like that's when he had jumped on stating that, okay, I'll forgive 10,000 in student loan debt once I get elected. So that's what he said. But then it seemed like it was kind of quiet. And then, extending the no student loan payments and interest, he kept doing it maybe like 6 months, even though I felt like he should have just went ahead and did it for the rest of the year.
Right.
And then once they finally had created the plan stating that by, when was it, October, they were going to have the application, and then November the 15th, that's when they were going to start approving people, and then you would know whether or not the student loans were going to be forgiven. And then all these lawsuits came down, and so I'm just like, he really, didn't want to do it.
He's like, yes.
What was that?
He was like, yes, when those lawsuits came.
Exactly. He was like, yes, but I'm just like, I'm wondering, why was it until October when it seems like everybody was just jumping on board to put in all these lawsuits, because it seems like lawsuits were coming from everywhere. So why do you think that was the case?
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you, no matter when he would have done it, he could have done it the first 2 weeks of his presidency. The lawsuits were just going to fly as a matter of course. A lot of these lawsuits that are filed, even the ones that are ridiculously frivolous, they just have so much funding from conservative think tanks to file all this paperwork, to hire all the attorneys. So no matter when he did it, the lawsuits would have came. But I think your original point was, had he done it earlier, it would have been a little bit more credible to say, hey, the HEROES Act, because this is a state of an emergency, look at these pandemic numbers. Now we're at a point where it's vaccines and everybody is kind of getting back to normal. People are no longer, people move 2 hours away from their job. Now they're being told they got to go back to work. So it's really no, for all essential purposes, we're probably about 80 to 85% back to normal, and it's only going to get more of what it was before the pandemic happened.
It's not a game, sir.